Today's video is going to be a little different. Instead of showing you a math concept before we do an art project, I want you to try to figure out what math can be seen through the project we make. For this project, you will need a piece of graphing paper, a ruler, a black marker or Sharpie, colored markers or pencils, and some scissors. First, take your piece of paper and using your ruler and black marker, make a line that is 20 squares long across the top and another one that is 20 squares long across the side, like this. After you have something like this, draw two more lines with the same length to make a square. Using your ruler once again, you're going to draw a vertical line every 2 squares on the graphing paper. So your first line should be 2 squares from the left, your second should be 2 squares from that, and so on. Do this until you have drawn lines across the entire square. Repeat the same steps again, but this time for the horizontal side. It should look like a chessboard after you finish. Now the fun part. Using your colored markers or pencils, make any design or pattern you'd like. Now that you have it colored, it's time to cut it out. Now that we've finished the art project, what mathematical concept can you see in this piece of art? What patterns do you see? Take a moment, pause the video, and observe your piece of art. Well, you probably noticed many things, but today we're only going to focus on a couple of them. Do you see how each colored square that you have in your design takes up a certain area of the board? For example, on mine, the blue takes up space here, here, and here. But can we find out how much of the entire board each color actually takes up? Well, that's where percentages and fractions come in. A fraction is used to represent a part of a whole. For example, 1/2 and 1,683 out of 3,588 are both fractions. Looking back at our piece of artwork, what would represent the part of the fraction and what would represent the whole of the fraction? Well, the whole refers to everything. So in this case, the whole is the entire board. How many squares are on the board? This is where area comes in. Since there are 10 squares on each side, the height and the width of the square is 10. And that means that the area is 10 times 10, which is 100 squares. So, we know that in total, there are 100 squares on our board. Now we just need to find the part. What part of the board does the color blue make up? Well, if we count, then we see that there are 36 squares that are colored blue. If we put these into a fraction, we get 36 over 100. And by dividing the top and bottom by 4, we can simplify this fraction into 9 over 25. In other words, 9/25 of the board is blue. However, in today's world, a lot of statistics and part-whole comparisons are done through percentages. For example, we only have 20% of the apples remaining, or I finished 75% of my homework. But believe it or not, percentages and fractions are essentially the same things, just in different forms. A percentage is a fraction whose whole is always 100. Meaning that the denominator is always 100. For example, if we had the fraction 2/5, how could we find the percentage? By multiplying the numerator and the denominator by 20, we get 40 over 100, which is equal to 40%. Since we have 100 squares in our piece of art, it should be pretty easy to make them into percentages, since the denominator of our fractions are already 100. In order to make our percentages, we need to know how many squares of each color we have. For me, I have 36 squares of blue, 20 squares of green, 20 squares of pink, and 24 squares of yellow. So for blue, my fraction is 36 over 100, which equals 9 over 25, which is also equal to 36%. The color blue takes up 36% of my board. For green, my fraction is 20 over 100, which equals 1/5, which is also equal to 20%. The color green takes up 20% of my board, and the same thing can be done with pink and yellow. Do the same thing with your art. How much of the board does each color take up? What do you notice about the percentages and the fractions from all of your colors? If you need a hint, try adding them together. Well, what do you get? For the fractions, you should be getting 100 over 100, meaning that the part is as big as a whole, which is 100 squares. So adding all of the colors together means that you make up the whole board, which is right. And for the percentages, you get 100%, which means that all the colors added together make up 100% of the board, which also makes sense. You probably already know, but fractions and percentages appear in so many places in everyday life. Just look at the last grade you got for your math test. I really hope you liked the video, and I encourage you to make different designs on more boards and find the fraction and the percentages of each color. I'll see you next time. Bye!